All right, so I've started recording, and as we discussed last month, we're recording the calls to make up a YouTube video that James will put together, which so that all the partners can hear the call, even if they weren't able to make it to the monthly meeting. So Randy's given a link to the agenda there, and the start of the meeting is questions and updates from partners, and we've only got a couple of partners here, Jeff and Ben. So Jeff and Ben, any particular updates or comments or questions to start off with?
Oh, hi, Dridge. Just a quick one on DL Heli pass-through on plane. Is it just working on a like motor 1, 2, 3, 4, or will it work on the throttle?
You set a mask. It works with any of the outputs, but it'll only work with outputs that are directly attached to the FMU, the main microcontroller. So, for example, if you're on something like a cube, which has a separate I/O microcontroller, and which means it's got main outputs and auxiliary outputs, then it only works on the auxiliary outputs. And you set up a mask of channels. There's a servo BLH mask parameter, which specifies a bit mask of the 16 possible output channels, which of those are being used for BL Heli ESCs. So that can be any of the output channels. If you just set it to auto, then it will ask the AP motors library, in which case for a quadcopter it'd be the 4 motor channels. But if you don't use auto, you can instead just specify the whole bit mask and have any number of channels that you want to set up for BL Heli pass-through and D-shot output.
Yeah, so it works fine on copter, but then on plane, if I say connect to auxiliary 1 and use a BL Heli auto, it doesn't seem to detect if I have the servo output set to throttle, but it seems to detect if it's as if it's a quad plane, like motor 1, 2, 3. But it doesn't seem to pick up if it's called
you'd have to set, if for example you only wanted the forward throttle to be BL Heli on a quad plane and not the vertical throttles, then you'd have to set the servo BLH mask to 256 if you were on something like a cube, which has got 8 main and 6 auxiliary outputs. So 256 is the first auxiliary set, which is bit 8, and so that will then map that auxiliary to being the first BL Heli pass-through channel. If you had the vertical motors first so on a plane, if you had something like 5, 6, 7, and 8 as your vertical channels, plus say 9 as your forward, then you would need to set it to, hexadecimal 1F0, which would be a value of 496. You can just do it using the bit mask functions in the ground station.
So if I want to just auxiliary 1 for the forward motor,
okay,
256.
You can, instead of calculating those numbers, I don't know if you're using Mission Planner or not. If you are, if in the current modern version of Mission Planner, if you click on the value for that parameter, it'll actually bring up a little bit mask editor. So it'll pop up a thing with tick boxes for each of the motors, and you would need to set it up there for the auxiliary one, the 9th one, because it's the 9th output.
Yeah. No,
and that will end up giving you a value of 256.
Yeah, I'll give that a go. And on the reverse thrust BL Heli and plane, is that still just in 310 in master at the minute?
I'll have to check actually whether we've got that. I don't think we have brought that back, but let me just check whether we did bring it back. And no, it's not in the plane stable release. So the reverse thrust is still only in the unstable release. My apologies for that if you need the reverse thrust.
I'll give master a try for that one because it's The plane's a simple plane, so it's fine for a crash test dummy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, it has actually been tested. There's a number of people who've been flying with the reverse thrust with BLHEL-32 ESCs and very successfully doing quite steep landings. So it does work. Hang on, just going to shut the door here because I've got dogs woofing in the background. Yeah, it certainly does work, and having the telemetry as well is really nice for logging your RPM and your current, etc.
Yeah, and even if you don't use the D-shot stuff, I could still technically use the servo in say the speed controller in channel 1, just normal PWM, not auxiliary. And can I still get BL Heli telemetry?
No, you can't. Unfortunately, with the current firmware of BLHEL-32, you can't get telemetry out of the ESC unless you're using D-shot. And that's because there's actually a reserved bit in the D-shot protocol that tells the ESC to send telemetry on this frame. And so unless you're sending D-shot, there's no mechanism. There are some other non-BL Heli firmwares that support D-shot, which have some magic PWM values that you can send, but they're not supported by BLHEL-32. So you do have to use D-shot if you want to get telemetry.
Okay. No, it's good. I'll just stuff I've been working on and trying to use BL Heli stuff more. It's much nicer.
Great. Okay.
Yeah. So, thank you very much.
No worries at all. So any more questions from either Ben or Jeff?
On the light fix, I saw that went in on 3.95, the orange light in a cube. So that's all good.
Yes, that dim light. Yes, apologies about that.
It had me confused at first.
Yes, that was it was aesthetic only, but still it was nice for the little dim orange light to go away.
Yeah, no, excellent. But that's I flashed one this week and it's gone, so that works great.
Great. It might get you to use push to talk if you possibly can, Ben. Yeah, thanks. All right. So if there's no more questions there, then we could go on to the project update from Randy and myself. So no more questions? Okay. So starting the project update, we have everyone got the link to the project update page, the slides there? Might just put that in the chat again, just to make sure everyone's got it. Randy's put it in. Thanks, Randy. Great. So we're on page 2, the stats, and quite a lot of activity in the last month. 492 patches affecting 105,000 lines of code. It's a little misleading though, because more than 2/3 of those lines of code were removing lines of code rather than adding them. We had a lot of stuff removed in the last month. Also 81 wiki updates, and total of 47 people contributed to code and wiki. So, okay, Tom's saying that I've got a bit of a crackle on my microphone. Is it bad enough that I should go and change mic, Tom? I do have another mic I can get from another room, or do you think I should just keep going? I can't hear the crackle, so I don't know how bad it is. No? Keep going? Oh, all right.
No, I can hear it as well, but it's not
unbearable. Okay, my apologies for the microphone crackle. I don't know quite what causes it. All right, so let's go on to page 3 on the report, which is driver changes. And so we had a big rename of the data flash subsystem to AP Logger. That was actually motivated because we were adding back in classic data flash support, and so it was rather strange to be adding a data flash driver. Data flash is actually a type of chip that we store logs in on the original APM1, APM2, and we'd kept the name all this time, though we didn't actually support data flash chips for years. We've now added back support for data flash chips for some F4 based boards. So we renamed it all to AP Logger to be a bit more of a sensible name. We removed more of the NutX code remnants, and just a little bit left over from that wasn't removed last month. And we removed the F4 Lite HAL after discussions with the Night Ghost, the author of that HAL. He's now recommending that everyone who was using it should be using the Shibios HAL, so there was no point in keeping that F4 Lite HAL around anymore. And we now have support for up to 6 relays. So that's the basically the same number as boards typically have auxiliary channels, so you can use all of them as relays if you want to. Disabled USART6 transmit on FMUV5. That's another workaround for the S-Bus issues that people have had on the Pixhawk 4. Added support for VR brain boards on Chibios, which is great to see. The VR brain boards have been a bit unloved in the past year or so, and they haven't been supported in master or not actively updated. So it's really nice they're now supported on Chibios, and that should bring them into the fold and get the same level of support and features as the other boards. KDE CAN protocol support and Toshiba CAN protocol support. Those are really exciting because it's our first edition of non-UAV CAN bus devices, and really nice work by Francisco and Randy on adding support for those 2 protocols. And there's in fact an update since I wrote this. There's been an addition to add support for feedback from the Toshiba CAN ESCs to get things like RPM and voltage from the ESCs, which is really nice. Enabled logging to data flash chips for the F4 boards. There's a bunch of small racing quad boards that we didn't support logging for, so we now got that supported. Fixed up a bug that had effectively disabled CAN bus support on Pixhawk 4 and PH4 Mini. Added SLCAN pass-through support. That's a very nice system that written by Sid, and that allows us to use any ArduPilot flight controller that has CAN as what's called an SLCAN adapter, basically a CAN sniffer. And it allows you to then connect with USB to that and basically use that flight controller as a CAN bus sniffer, which is quite important for installing firmware. Makes it much more convenient to install firmware on CAN devices. So a very nice piece of work. Added the RM3100 compass driver, which is yet another compass. And we fixed an issue with probing of I2C buses on I2C rangefinders, where we weren't probing all the buses. In particular, we weren't probing the I2C A and B buses on the Pixhawk 4. And so fixed that up so that you can put the rangefinders on any of the I2C buses. So that's about it. Any questions at all on the driver changes? All right, so in that case, we'll go on to the next page. So page 4, which is the plane update. And we had a new stable release of plane in the last month, 395, and just about to get a 396 in the next couple of days. So 395, there was an improvement to rudder differential, a differential thrust on left and right motors in tail setters when they're in forward flight. Fixed an EKF yaw reset logic bug that caused a little twitch in yaw on the takeoff of quad planes. Improved the throttle mix handling for quad planes, which makes landings smoother. It prevents the vehicle from trying to correct its position when it's settling for a landing, which improves its the smoothness of landings, particularly if you've got any sort of GPS errors happening at the same time. Fixed a bug in baro reset when disarmed. That particularly affects people who are doing flights at 2 different altitudes, where they take off from one altitude, land at a remote site at a different altitude, then take off again without rebooting and come back to the first site. There was a bug in the calculation of the height above sea level when doing a mission like that. It's an unusual mission profile, but quite an important one for some applications. And fixed a VTOL landing disarm bug when you have a bad height estimate. So if you, for example, you've got a bad rangefinder or you've badly estimated the height of the terrain you're going to be landing on, then it previously could just sit running the motors forever and not try and disarm because it didn't think it had got into the land final altitude. And we fixed that up so it will disarm as long as it's in a landing state. So any questions all about that? About the plane update and plane status? All right, in that case, over to you, Randy, for a copter update.
Yep. I realized I probably should have put the copter before the plane, so you got a little break after the statistics and driver pages, but maybe next time. Okay, so copter update. We released 3.6.5, and there's a link to the release notes. I also copied the some of the major changes just below. So it went out actually quite a few weeks ago, just after the last call. There was some improvements to SD card reliability. So one of the complaints that we got with 3.6 when it first went out was some people said that their SD cards weren't working reliably. So this seems to resolve all those issues. There's also FrSky S-Bus failsafe fix on the flight mode and auxiliary switches. So the funny thing about FrSky S-Bus is that when it recovers from a failsafe, not all of the channels recover at exactly the same time. Sometimes, so sometimes you'll have a laggard, another channel which doesn't recover until much later. And if that was set up as an auxiliary switch, you could end up with whatever feature was attached to that switch, triggering as soon as the vehicle came out of failsafe. So that's fixed up now in 3.6.5. Also, there is this last one's actually from Tridge, so I don't actually know the details too much on this. You want to explain this last one, Tridge? PixHawk 4 RC parsing fix?
Yes. So there was actually a couple of issues. The main one is when your S-Bus input on the PixHawk 4 is a little bit tricky because of the way that the S-Bus input pin actually goes to 3 pins on 2 microcontrollers. It's a fairly complex arrangement, and we had the USART6 transmit pin on the FMU enabled onto a UART, and that was causing a pull-up on the S-Bus line, which could disturb the S-Bus signal and made it more likely to get corruption. So that was part of it, but before that, in the last month, we've had other fixes for that board. For example, we've switched across to using Shibios on the I/O firmware on that board, and we have which gives us the parity checking per byte in the S-Bus input. And so there's been a number of changes in the way the S-Bus input is being handled to make it more robust. But it was particularly fragile on that board because of the unusual electrical arrangement of that input.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so that's out. We have started beta testing of 3.6.6 now, and it's got a couple of important changes. Well, one quite important change. So the first one, yes, is this EKF compass switching fix. So this is from Tridge, and perhaps with some input from Leonard and Paul. And my understanding of the issue is that on boards with 3 compasses, if EKF decides that one of the compasses is bad, i.e. it does not match up with the other IMU data and the other data that the EKF is receiving, it marks it as essentially unhealthy, and it shouldn't use it. But unfortunately, because of this bug, it may continue to use that bad compass, which can have a bad impact on your position estimation or even your attitude estimation in the worst case. So 3 compasses is very common these days on flight controllers. So although this issue doesn't come up a lot, we haven't seen a lot of incidents. When it does happen, it's serious. So we highly recommend that people upgrade to 3.6.6 once it's released later this week. Couple of other small things in this release. We have a RSSI, a receiver signal strength driver that accepts a PWM input on any channel. So that's good if you're going to, it's actually most likely going to be used as a fuel gauge, but in any case, that's in there. We've got the CAN port fixed on PixHawk 4 and PixHawk 4 Mini. And we also fixed a bug with spline waypoints. The first spline waypoint could be skipped, but that is also now resolved in 3.6.6. So like I said, that will be released hopefully later this week as the official version, and we highly recommend people upgrade to it once it's available. As a side note, on the right side of the slide, there's a image of a decacopter. This is just a vehicle which has 10 motors, 10 arms and 10 motors. So it's not a dodeca hexacopter, it's just a decacopter. It's not something that a lot of people want to fly, I'm sure, but there's a link there just below the below the picture, which is to a video from iForce-D. And he's actually described how to modify ArduPilot to support, unusual vehicles like this. So in case you're a developer or you have a developer in your company and you want to know how to modify ArduPilot for supporting an unusual frame like this, that video might be interesting. We're also working, of course, on Copter 3.7. It won't start beta testing for a couple of months at least, but work continues. Some of the big things that we're working on include scripting and also stay out zones. So yeah, you can look forward to that. Any questions on these Copper updates? Okay, we'll roll forward then to the next slide, which is rover updates. So we've just released rover 3.5. There's a link to the blog post there. It's quite a big release. It includes Tubios, which went out of course for Copter and Plane over the last few months. It also includes support for sailboats, improvements for BalanceBot, also a couple of new frame types, Omni X and Omni Plus. These are vehicles that can move laterally. And there's a link on the bottom right to a video from one of the users who's actually built one of these vehicles. So that's kind of interesting for inspection. Also includes a bunch of new flight modes, including follow mode. So one drone following another drone, or even several drones, several boats or rovers, following each other in kind of a convoy style. That's all possible. Also simple mode, which is a bit like Copter simple mode in that you push the sticks and the vehicle moves in that direction. So instead of directly controlling, steering and speed, for example, you would you just push the sticks in one direction and the vehicle goes that way. More auxiliary switches are supported. Rover was almost had one auxiliary switch previously. Now it's like Copter and Plane. You can use up to channel 12 for auxiliary switches. We've also improved safety a little bit with the EKF failsafe. So Copter's always had an EKF GPS failsafe for years now, but Rover did not have it, so that's been added. There's also a bunch of bug fixes with the object avoidance using 360 LiDAR, and also another bug fix for the wheel encoder support. So if your wheel encoders can, of course, be used in place of a GPS or with a GPS to improve non-GPS, for position estimation. We're also working on 3.5.1. Will probably go out later this week for beta testing. That includes the same EKF compass switching bug fix that I talked about a moment ago for Copter, and we'll also add support for Gripper. So there we go. Any questions, comments on Rover?
Yeah, I hadn't known about that simple mode change. So if you've got an ordinary rover with like a steering, the ordinary steering at the front, not skid steering, and you use the, push it in a direction, does it turn and then drive towards it? So it's a bit like guided sort of thing where it does the turning, or does it just not move sideways?
Yeah, it's a bit like guided mode. So yeah, basically the deflection of the stick controls the speed, and the direction of the deflection controls the desired heading. So if you have a regular rover, you just move the stick a little bit to the right, for example, it will very slowly turn, and then it'll head east or right.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, it was meant because we're planning. One of the companies that sponsors me is planning to make a boat for like firefighters. So when they have to search a river or something like that for something, a sunken car or whatever, they wanted a very easy to use mode for those people. So that's why this was developed.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, it'd be much easier to use.
Randy, is it? I just had this question asked to me today. Is it possible to do a rover where you're doing a waypoint mission and you do the segment from one waypoint to the next waypoint is done forwards, and then the segment to the next waypoint is done in reverse?
Yes, it is possible. Yeah, there's we support the do reverse command, and yeah, some confusion that of whether that means do the mission in reverse, i.e., do waypoint 3 and then 2 and then 1, or if it means turn the vehicle around so that it drives backwards. And the do reverse command makes the vehicle turn around and drive backwards.
So in the case where they put the next waypoint would be behind it, would it not turn around? It would just do the heading and carry on in reverse?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Okay.
It would just stop, and then it would stop as soon as it hits that do reverse command. It will stop and then turn around, or do whatever it needs to do to get to the waypoint in backing up.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, and then the do reverse has a parameter. First parameter controls whether you want to essentially turn on reverse or turn off reverse. So set it to 0, set that first parameter to 0, and then it'll turn back around to the regular orientation.
So you basically add that command after every waypoint done.
Yeah, that's right. Any other questions, comments on rover updates? Okay, just one last thing I wanted to add. Obviously, object avoidance is of a lot of interest to a lot of people. So we've been working on integrating Ross's ability to do object avoidance with ArduPilot. So I haven't published a video yet, but hopefully in the next week or so, I'll publish a video of an Ion Robotics rover essentially using Ross to drive around objects. We've already done a couple of tests. It seems to work. So we'll publish a video of that. There's a setup wiki page on the developer wiki. So just go to the developer wiki, and in the Ross section, you'll see an item called object avoidance. Okay, so I think that's the end of the rover updates, and the last slide is the events. Trey, do you want to talk about this one?
Sure. So the next major event is next month, which is the Canberra Developer Unconference, and 23rd and 24th of March. But the activities will actually start kicking off a few days before that, because a number of the dev team are arriving a few days early for sort of intensive hacking sessions and working on various access to the code. There's some thought about doing some intensive work on the scripting support, for example, in that lead up. So looks like we're going to have about 35 people at the conference, which is fantastic. And be really nice to see everyone. This tends to be an event that really sets the stage for the development for the year. And so, yeah, it's looking to be a really good event. If there's any partners who haven't signed up to come along to the event and would still like to, then it's still possible. So if you're hearing this and thinking you might like to come to Canberra next month, then feel free to get in contact, and you can see a link to the details of it on the upcoming events page on the slides for this talk, and that gives some details on how to join up, and you'd be very welcome. So any questions at all about the unconference?
Is there any sort of agenda being posted yet?
We're just roughly working on things. James posted a document, a sort of a spreadsheet where we're trying to work out exactly who's going to talk when. But I think we'll be getting development updates from many of the core developers. So, for example, from Paul and Leonard and Randy and myself will each be giving talks. Plus, a real highlight is, I think, going to be Michael Dubois on the progress on the scripting. And Sid, I hope, will be able to give a talk, as John Challenge is going to be there as well, and I'm looking to hear the latest things that he's been working on. So we don't have a detailed agenda yet, but we certainly have plenty of people put their hands up. Part of the idea of an unconference is sort of to be not fully organised and full agenda beforehand, so we can be a bit flexible. But that it will develop a more complete agenda as we're getting closer to the event. One of the things I'm trying to work out is about movements within Canberra. So, for example, I believe Randy's going to be trying to bring at least one boat, and there's a number of waterways we can go in Canberra. Are you still bringing the boat, Randy?
Yep, I think 2 boats.
Two boats,
really
fantastic.
fast one and a slower mapper.
Great. So just sort of working out where we do some of our events so that we have some water. There is a pool at the hotel, but I think it's a bit small for the sort of boats that Randy is bringing. And so we're looking at 2 different spots to be able to host like a barbecue right next to the water so that Randy can demo the boats and talk about them while people are enjoying a barbecue.
Sounds good.
Any more questions on that at all?
One of the other events that's coming up soon, I guess, is the AUVSI. Jeff, you're here. Any updates on that?
Yep. So we've got we reserved the booth, and we ended up we were originally going to go with a 20 by 20, but we had some changes in people's plans, and we ended up with a 20 by 40, which, for the record, is 200 square feet bigger than Auturian and Drone Code's booth put together. So, and we're looking at some other options and things that we can do to make kind of a nice big splash for ArduPilot, seeing as how it's pretty clear from last year's show that we power somewhere around half the aircraft in there. And I think there's going to be some product announcements from a couple of the companies in the booth. I'm hopefully going to have enough money to finish my product in time for the show for sure. And I think some of the other players have mentioned that they're going to make some product announcements there. So far in the booth, we have Hex, we have my company, we have SpectreWorks, we have Blue Robotics, and we have Aeon Robotics. And we're looking for maybe 1 or 2 other possible companies that are interested. But we are probably, there may be some constraints just to keep people from competing with each other within the booth. So things that we have to investigate as we move forward, just to make sure that everyone's got a fair shot and a reasonable representation.
Sounds great. We have a couple more events later on in the year. So Interdrone, I think some conversation has just started happening now around Interdrone in Las Vegas, which is going to be September 3rd to September 6th, I guess. And Craig, you're going to be point person on this event, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
All right. So if anybody has questions or comments about Interdrone, Craig is the one to talk to, I guess. Thank you very much. And in the last month, Yanni has also announced a ArduPilot meetup at the SZUAVIA event in Shenzhen. So on June 20th to the 22nd. And Tom, you're planning to make the trip, right?
Correct.
Cool. I will be there as well. I think Leonard's going as well. So at least a few of us will be there. Probably do some hacking sessions. And that's the list of the events. Any questions, comments?
Air show in Avalon is between now and the developer meetup, by the way. I don't remember what day it is, though.
Yes, I was just having a quick peek at the timing of that. Yeah, I think we've got, I think Hex is setting up a booth at the Avalon show. I'm not sure if Leonard's company is as well. But,
I think it's the first couple of weeks of March from memory, but I'd have to go and check.
It is, because we were trying to get the developer meetup in to coincide with the air show, so that people ended up being one international flight. But I think it ended up being better for most people's schedules to have the developer meetup at the end of March, and and those who are going to go to the air show to just figure out their own arrangements.
Yeah, I didn't actually find anyone to put their hands up that wanted to go to both and was sort of committing to that at the time that we're setting the date. But
right.
Yep.
So I guess that brings us to actually the next item on the agenda was open discussion. I'm not sure if there's anything that people want to bring up at this point.
There will be a remote ID draft standard going out in a couple of weeks from ASTM.
Random announcement.
Ooh.
Yep. So, and they merged Wi-Fi in. So Wi-Fi is in there, Bluetooth is in there, and those are the broadcast ones. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff I think that's in the network side that I haven't really been paying attention to because that's a little too much IT style software engineering for my like.
That's great. I'll need to have a look at that standard and see whether we can get the MAV ESP 8266 firmware to support that OpenID, those fields. The standards, the documents are available on what you need to do on the Wi-Fi side. Is that right?
I will check. I know. I think OpenDrone ID has the Wi-Fi section published now, but I'm not sure off the top of my head. I've been focusing more on the Bluetooth side.
Are there any test apps for this? So can you fire up something on your phone, for example, with Wi-Fi, and it show what drones it sees?
So Tom might be better equipped to answer that. I don't know if anything's public though. I know there's some issues with how Bluetooth plays at the board level with Android and whatnot and iOS. So there's some stuff that's being looked
It was
at
the
there.
Wi-Fi one specifically that I know Tom did the Bluetooth one.
Yeah, but I don't know if they've done a Wi-Fi one as well. I think right now it's mostly in let's build a standard and get that approved by the powers that be before we start writing code is kind of the vibe that I've gotten out of the group so far.
All right.
So
if you come across a test client for Wi-Fi, let me know, because it'd be much easier to develop the code if I had something that could receive the ID and display it, so I know that I'm sending the right packet.
Gotcha. Yeah, there was a big question in last week's call about that, about how all that sort of verification work is going to be done, and I don't think it's a fully answered question from the point of view of the standards making side of things. But I think there are some people who are working on them. Whether or not those will be open source is a big TBD. But I don't think it would be too terribly dreadful to make an open source version of it if we needed to.
Yeah, the client. I mean, even if it was a closed source, I mean, the ideal thing would be something like an app for your phone. And I don't even mind if the app costs $5 or something, to buy it, because they'll have to have this thing eventually. The point of doing the Wi-Fi is that anyone can turn on their phone and get the IDs.
Yep.
So there's sort of, it's fairly pointless to do it unless somebody develops an Android app that will display it. And I was just wondering what the progress was on creating of that app.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is kind of gated behind. There's an NPRM publishing sometime in the next 24 hours for the FAA, as well as there's a bunch. The standard is about to go off to vote at ASTM for actual conversion to an actual numbered standard instead of a work item.
Right, okay. Slight acronym overload there. Trying to follow them, decode them while you're going along.
Yeah, NPRM is the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking for the FAA, so they're going to change the drone rules again. And then within ASTM, the numbered standards are done and public, and you can purchase a copy of them, if you will. And then a work item is more of like the draft or the document control mechanism for a revision to a numbered standard.
Right.
So
it's a purchase standard. So if we want to get a copy of the standard, then could ArduPilot as a group buy a copy of the standard for all the developers to access, or do I need to buy it individually?
I will ask. I think the standard itself is going to represent sort of a front end for it. I think it's going to kind of get implemented like Wi-Fi. Is kind of the goal everyone has is there'll be interoperability capabilities between one or two different providers of equipment and protocol stacks. But yes, I think there's a way to do it, and if not, we can always get ArduPilot like a organizational membership to ASTM and go from there. And there's a couple of items from the marketing side of the fence that I need to finish up regarding organizational memberships to things so that we are appropriately represented in those.
If the standard isn't too expensive, then I could just buy a copy for myself. It'd sort of be nice to have it available to other dev team members.
It'll be between 50 and 100 US, if I remember correctly.
Not a problem. It's not a big cost.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. It'd be really nice to support it.
Yeah, I've been working on the draft for that, and I've been working on some drawings off and on between the consulting projects to get that integrable in a clean and tight way with the normal sort of cube hardware stack and possibly even other hardware stacks. just so that it's
Very nice.
there. And then I may or may not do a Wi-Fi 1 also, just because Wi-Fi is a little bit harder to wrangle from an RF point of view and to keep channel count high. I've been doing, as part of the committee work, I've been doing some calculations for system capacity and whatnot, and Wi-Fi is much lower capacity than Bluetooth, and I would prefer that we steer towards Bluetooth if we're going to adopt something. I know the Wi-Fi is convenient for everybody, but from a capacity point of view, like if you're doing a drone light show, Wi-Fi gets saturated instantly, but there are other
particularly on
solutions for that
2.4.
problem. Yeah, so there's other solutions for doing things like light shows and parks and whatnot, and that's been discussed. But it's from a general point of view, the Bluetooth stuff seems to be a much lower cost option once the driver stacks in phones get updated with the requirements to fix There's an issue with how the drivers apparently hand off the advertisements from the Bluetooth chip in the phone or the Bluetooth radio in the phone to the next level in the OS, to the OS itself, and that will once those get resolved on Apple and Google's front, then I think Bluetooth will be a very viable solution as well.
Yep, and the Wi-Fi one is 2.4, isn't it?
I believe they're speccing for both, but I have to go back and check again. My principal paying attention has been on the Bluetooth side.
Thanks for all the info.
No worries.
I have a. Are we done with that?
I am.
Yes, I think so. Done it to death,
Okay.
I think.
Yep. All right. Ben, are you there?
Oh, hi, Tom.
Hi, Ben. I have a question for you as a vendor, talking to customers that are using the ArduPilot. We're looking at adding the scripting feature. I'm wondering, from what you're hearing from your customers, is there something that you wish the ArduPilot could do that we could do with scripting? Or do you even know how the scripting is going to be working? And because we're going to be doing this hackathon soon, and basically it's going to happen all at once, I think. So we have to get some input before we kind of go anywhere with it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess some people want like more complex mixing or fail-safe features. I guess when it comes out, people will suddenly realize what they need it for. But yeah, more complex mixes on planes, parachute triggering, maybe some detection type stuff, or complex waypoint functions in mapping, maybe some more advanced tilting of gimbals for cameras.
All right.
I was talking to Michael DB about scripting stuff as well, and just looking at doing going from, say, flight deck to being able to insert like a waypoint from flight deck, which is the Craft and Theory Lua script that runs on the Tyrannus and OpenTX controllers. As I have a design on the design side, I have a customer who wants to not have to get out a phone and start doing waypoints with the phone. They want to be able to just do it all in the controller in a much more simplistic way. So I think that'll be kind of interesting to see how that can be put together.
Yeah, the challenge there is the UI side, really. Displaying, some reasonable way to represent the waypoints on the limited displays at transmitters. Though some transmitters are getting quite good LCD screens now, so they might be able to actually display waypoints reasonably. But the original Tyrannus would be a bit of a challenge on that little mono, very low resolution display.
Yeah, I think this waypoint that he's gonna want, just based on my observation of his user experience case, if you will, or use case, is he's gonna want fly distance at heading and then land, and that's the extent of the waypoint. So it'll be a very, very simple setup, because he's just flying off the edge of something out to a point, dropping the vehicle to take a sample, and then return to launch, or fly up and allow the user to pull manual control to bring it home if the launch point is moved, because it's a super low cost waterborne copter for launch and recovery off a boat or a dock.
You have like a bait copter.
Say again, Randy?
Sorry, one of those fishing bait copters.
Yep.
Be one of those.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of fun times going around with all that stuff. From the business people are all mad at each other because they all think they ripped each other off, and I'm just kind of standing back and just building a circuit board and moving on.
Yeah.
Oh, Tom, I did have one request from a customer. It might be good for, say, quad planes if it lands, delivers something, and then a user can press a button on the plane and it'll start the takeoff sequence and carry on the mission.
Yeah, that's good. Getting the input from the buttons and such, and reacting to it, that's a good one. Yeah.
That we actually have that feature as a pending branch because we implemented that for the Outback Challenge, where we had a. I agree, it's a good use of scripting, but that is something that Peter and I plan to bring in because we have it fully implemented. What we did was we added a waypoint type called wait for button, and we added another option that says continue mission after disarm. So what you do is you've got a VTOL landing, and then a wait for button, and then after that you then start up your return mission. In our case, it had a wait for airspace clearance as well after the wait for button to make sure that it had clear airspace above before it took off. But that allowed for the one button push with just a button connected to a relay pin on the aircraft.
Yeah, definitely a great thing for scripting. Upon button press, do whatever custom thing you want to do. That'd be nice.
Yeah, although I think it'd probably be done as a mission item. Have a script function which is to be called for a custom mission item. So you'd have like a custom waypoint type 1, and then it'd take parameters, and you could make a script which implements custom waypoint type 1, which waits for a button press. And that would be an alternative way to implement it instead of hard coding the functionality like we did.
Right, so that's your implementation for what you're doing. I'm just saying that those are two things that can be separate and linked together via the scripts. But yeah, mission items being a script thing, and then buttons be a button thing, and they can just interact if they want to. But yeah, those are good examples of things to implement in scripts.
Yeah, for the button, we'd probably just make scripts be able to access the existing AP button functionality. We've got this AP button library already, and that's an input type, and we just need accessor functions for the scripting language so it can ask, is a button pressed and when was it last pressed?
Yep, great. Anything else?
Oh, on a side note, for plane stuff, takeoff on a switch. So an auto takeoff assigned to a switch where it just climbs to a height. I know lots of people ask
this is for a VTOL aircraft or
no, just normal plane, just take off on a switch.
Yeah, so that's something that, in fact, that's motivated a fair bit of work that Tom has been doing recently with reworking the structure of plane and to create a takeoff flight mode. And a number of people have asked for that, and it is something that we are planning to add in soonish. And the way it would work is if you're in this special flight mode, the takeoff flight mode, then whichever way the plane is pointing when you arm to trigger the takeoff, it would also support things like the shake to start type options that we have in automatic takeoff at the moment. Once the motor starts and it's doing the takeoff, it would then climb in the direction that it was pointing at the time of takeoff and then circle in front of you at a specified altitude and radius. So basically take off and loiter, and then you then flicker to another flight mode to continue the flight.
That would be perfect, yeah.
Yeah, I've had that request from a couple of partners actually. So I appreciate you telling me that because another partner reminded me of that one just a few days ago. And with multiple people requesting that, then that would be that pushes up the priority of that feature a bit in my list.
Yeah. Sorry, Tom.
Yeah. So that's like I said, that's a big motivation for something. I was trying to add it was very hard to add flight modes in plane. Both rover and copter have been basically refactored the whole database or the whole source code to allow know what's going on in a given mode, and it's been kind of rejuggled to make it more clear. And plane that never happened. So I did that, and there's a few steps to do. And basically, the first step is done-ish, and we're just waiting for the ArduPilot gods to basically bless it and move on to adding. And then once that's in, we can add things like a takeoff mode or other custom modes.
All right, so I think that's, unless there's any other business where I think we're about done, that we did have on the agenda a funding update. But would you have anyone from the funding committee here to give a funding update?
I think I'm the only one here from there, but I don't have an update.
Right, okay. That's fine. So is there any other business before we wrap up for the day?
Oh, one more thing, Tridge, while you're there.
Sure.
I have a plane to do where it's going to get dropped from a weather balloon. So it's going to transfer some data from some sensor, and then it has to be dropped from 20 kilometers or so. So I'm going to need your help on that one.
That's absolutely fine. It just so happens that I'm helping somebody else with a plane drop, a glider drop at the moment. So it seems to be the flavour of the month at the moment. And there are some things to look out for. It is supported in ArduPilot, but there's some issues you need to think about fairly carefully regarding things like whether you arm before takeoff or not, and whether it's armed the whole way up or whether it arms in the air. And the other part, if it's going weather balloon, depending on how high you're going, you've got to be a bit careful about things like the servos freezing up because it can get very cold. And I've got an image. I'll just give you a link to it here of what the temperatures look like when you go up in a weather balloon. So this is a weather balloon run that I did a number of years ago for the Lowen with the Edge group that do balloon drops. And as you can see there, the various temperatures. In this particular case, it does vary in different parts of the world, but in this particular case, you can see that the airspeed temperature, which is the best estimate of the external temperature, actually got below minus 50 degrees C. You can see it actually flatlined because it reached the minimum temperature that sensor can read. So it got actually below minus 50. If you extrapolate the graph a little bit, you'll probably got to about minus 55 or so. So it's pretty cold. And we do actually have features to cope with that. So we've got a feature for during the climb phase of the mission, while it's going up in the balloon and it's getting cold, you can ask it to wiggle its servos every few seconds on the way up to make sure they don't freeze up. It just keeps them a little bit active and it lowers the chance of them freezing. There may be better mechanical solutions that be more appropriate for Jeff or Philip to comment on. But this was just a simple software solution to try to make sure that it didn't freeze up. But it's the sort of thing you need to think about fairly carefully. But it has been done a number of times. People have done drops like this from more than 100,000 feet and successfully had the aircraft then glide back to a landing position. And so it certainly can be done, but getting it right the first time can be a bit tricky. So if you need some assistance with that, feel free to contact me during the month and I can try to give you a bit of personalized support.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll get some more details. It's a local university and they have done some of the component testing just taking it up there. They have took servos up, but I guess they haven't used them up there. But I'll get a bit more information, such as how long it's going to be up there for. I think they have approval to do this in New Zealand, apparently.
Yeah. X-Plane is quite good for testing this sort of thing, by the way. If you've got a copy of X-Plane, then ArduPilot can connect into X-Plane, and because it supports drops from heights, which is pretty handy.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay, I'll contact you on Skype a bit later in the month once I've got some more information.
Okay, great. Sounds like a fun project.
Yeah, thank you.
There is antifreeze grease of some sort available that you can fill the servos up with.
Yeah, they had some fancy space products. I think one of them was grease and then some special batteries.
Yeah, heating the airspeed sensor is another one. If you have airspeed, it might be simpler just not use an airspeed sensor, but then there's issues with, there's a massive difference between the apparent and true airspeed once you're at high altitudes. So having an airspeed sensor can be a good idea, but at the same time, there's the potential for it to freeze up.
One thing I was wondering, when it comes down, it's going to reach some speed. Is there something to stop the servos burning themselves out, trying to correct itself?
They shouldn't burn themselves out. I mean, the speed at which they're going to move is still not going to be more than like the 50 hertz, and the rate of movement is by the D term. So I wouldn't expect them to burn out, except for the fact that things can overheat at high altitude because of the lack of air for cooling. So that's really the main reason. Your electronics motors can overheat at high altitude because there isn't enough air to cool them. But we should really talk about this.
Yeah.
Contact me during the month and we'll talk about it in more detail.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Any more questions at all? Okay. In that case, we'll wrap up this month's partners call. Thank you very much for everyone who attended, and thank you to everyone who listened to the audio and the video later. And we will look forward to talking to you all next month.
See you then.
Thanks, guys.